Tonight, the Nashville Predators get their third crack against the Vancouver Canucks, one of the best teams in the NHL. What are the big differences between tonight's game and the two games they played back in October? Plus, a quick game of word association involving the Nashville Predators today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day. Every single day, we are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, want to start with a special hello to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys and we appreciate the support you give us week in and week out. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at the Hockey News.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. On today's show, Ann and I are going to be doing a game of word association. We're going to be dropping some words about the Nashville Predators, NHL, hockey in general, and the other is going to try to come up with the one word that can describe that player, that thing, that entity. Mm-hmm. Some fun coming up later on the show. First, though, let's eat our meats and vegetables before we get to the dessert. I guess that's still a thing. The Predators take on the Vancouver Canucks tonight at Bridgestone Arena. The Vancouver Canucks, one of the best teams in the NHL this season, 21-9-2. Nashville Predators, the best team in the NHL over the past month, 13-3 over their last 16 games, 18-13 on the season. They've climbed their way back into the first wildcard spot in the West after being the second worst team in the Western Conference just about a month and a half ago. So here we are, Ann. We've talked about the Preds before. We've said that they're one of the best teams in the NHL. Mm-hmm. They're trending in the right direction. We're seeing great signs from this team. All these wins are fun. This tonight seems like a big test of, okay, is this real?
Yes.
Is this the Nashville Predators that we're going to come to expect? Or, is that just racking up points and good wins over ant teams?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Nick. We talked with Andrew Brunette after practice yesterday, and it was really interesting to me because one of the terms that he doesn't seem to want to use very often is measuring stick. Like we asked him, the Colorado Avalanche game that the Predators eventually won. Thank you, Yakov Trenin. But before that game, we're like, hey, is this a measuring stick game? And he's like, well, I don't know that I would say that necessarily. I mean, it's a good opponent and stuff like that. And yesterday, he's like, this will be a really good measuring stick for the team. And I was like, wow, here we are. Like, this is it. So I agree with you. And here's what my question to you is, did you ever think like preseason that we would be wrestling with a game between the Vancouver Canucks and the Nashville Predators that would be so interesting across the league and that would be a measuring stick game for being good? You know what I'm saying? Like, these two teams are pretty unexpected, I think. Not that Vancouver hasn't had some really quality pieces in place for, a little while, but this is the season where they've kind of gotten it all together, and you can see what happens when a team hits that mark. Vancouver is second only to the Vegas Golden Knights when it comes to points. They have a game in hand over some other teams, but they're the real deal. Vancouver is the real deal. And tonight, the Predators, who have been very, very good for the last month, are going to find out how real are they? Like, is this the real deal for the Nashville Predators as they reset? So 100%, this is a test for the Predators. This is a measuring stick game.
You talked about the Vancouver Canucks, and I think we saw this version of the team kind of the end of last year. Remember, they were abysmal to start the season. Fans were, booing every game. There's, protests, and, they kind of clean house a little bit there. And Rick Tocchet comes in, and, the Canucks start to play better down the stretch. And then you don't really notice, because they were so far out until the end of the season, that they were right there with the Preds in terms of being just outside the playoffs. A lot of people thought this was going to be like the team in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. So you saw them absolutely turn it around towards the end of the year. And this season seems like it's an extension of that. And, again, like JT Miller, remember, there was a lot of scuttlebutt about him, in these recent off seasons. 45 points this year. Yeah. One of the NHL leaders is in that category. Elias Pettersson right behind him at 39. You go down the lineup, and Brock Besser's got 23 goals. Remember, we thought Brock Besser had kind of petered out a couple of years ago. They're getting so much contribution from so many people up and down the lineup. And the crazy thing about the Canucks, Anne, is they are first in the NHL in scoring this year, 3.75 goals a game, but they're also second in defense. Just 2.4 goals allowed a game. So in terms of well-rounded teams, like maybe Vegas is the other one, but there's not many teams in the NHL that are this good both ends of the ice as the Vancouver Canucks, and the Preds are going to have their work cut out for them tonight.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is a full assault from all different angles. You talk about being a well-rounded team, and you think of teams like Edmonton. Edmonton has been on a tear recently, but you're like, well, their goaltending is maybe not as strong as it could be. So, their offense is carrying them. When you look at the Vancouver Canucks, everybody's doing everything. Everything is really going well for the Vancouver Canucks. They just have it together. And I look at the Canucks, and in my mind, I think this is the Predators 2 seasons into the reset, 3 seasons into the reset, where everybody has kind of gotten used to playing with each other. Everybody sort of peaks at the right time. And so I do think this is a really good game to sort of compare where the Predators are. The Canucks kind of have it all going together. And I don't think it's a fluke. When they first started winning this season, everybody's like, hey, look at the Canucks. How about that? Well, look at the Canucks. Look at the Canucks, because this isn't a fluke. This isn't a team that's just stumbling into wins. They're beating other teams. They're not just winning games. They're beating other teams. So I think tonight is a big test for the Predators. I think the Predators maybe are really looking forward to this game tonight, because they did lose twice to them in a week back in October. And that was tough. One of those games, I think they felt like they played okay. One of those games, I think they really wish they had back. With enough time passing and with where the Predators are now, I think tonight this is a game you mark on your calendar. And again, I come back to, who would have thought the game you marked on your calendar was the Predators and the Canucks, y'all?
Canucks, right?
Didn't see that one coming.
It is interesting, and you kind of hit on the difference between where the Preds were in those first 2 games to now. We're going to hit on that in just a second, but it's going to have a big game feel.
Yes, it is.
For sure. It's going to be at Bridgestone Arena. The players and, Brunette has obviously spoken about how big of an opportunity this is to kind of prove yourself. I think the Canucks know that this is going to be one of the tougher games that they've had on their schedule recently, going against a team that's won 13 out of 3. It's been especially good at Bridgestone Arena this season. It's a home game. I think the fans are well aware of that too. So, I'll tell you, man, we always talk about like the magic for the Preds the week before Christmas, how there's just always seem to be some like season defining moments in that week before. You got the Canucks tonight, you got Matt Duchene and the Stars on Saturday. So you are going to have a couple of moments, and I think that the Preds can really put their stamp on where they are as a team right now. It's going to be interesting to see. We mentioned that the Predators played the Canucks a couple seasons, or a couple times earlier this season. Both of those were losses, but how different of a team are the Nashville Predators from that game to the game tonight? We're going to dive into that question in just 1 second. But first, I want to mention today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. That's because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And if you bet on the Seattle Seahawks pulling the upset against the Philadelphia Eagles last night, you are a happy camper because there were not a lot of bettors that were with you on that one. So you got some big odds and some big payouts this morning. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, like how many rushing yards is Derrick Henry going to have this next game? How many passing yards will Levis have? Over-unders on point totals and certain stats, and much, much more. They always have great offers to choose from, and the app is so easy to use. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Ann, Preds take on the Vancouver Canucks tonight at Bridgestone Arena. Probably the biggest game the Predators have had probably within the last couple of weeks in terms of home games.
Yeah.
We mentioned that these two teams have played before, twice in a week span back in October. And it was kind of a weird mix of two games. And that first one at Bridgestone Arena, Vancouver won 3-2, but it was clear that Vancouver probably should have won that game 6-1 or whatever it was. And then the next game, the Vancouver Canucks in Vancouver beat Nashville 5-2.
Yeah.
And that's the one you look at and go, you know what? I think the Predators might have outplayed the Canucks in this game.
Yeah, for sure. Here's the player that I think is important to keep your eye on tonight, who, for whatever reason, has had a success in those two games, was Colton Sissons, y'all. Colton Sissons scored in both games against the Vancouver Canucks. But there were a lot of things that the Predators kind of needed to do differently. In the first game, they got 18 shots on goal, so they really weren't able to possess the puck as much as they wanted. They weren't able to get as many shots off as they wanted. In that game, like you said, in Vancouver, here's the one thing I do remember about that game is the ice was janky. Do you remember that? Liam Foudy had a penalty shot and he kind of stumbled because the ice was janky and the puck was kind of bouncing everywhere. It was a weird ice game, but it was a game that you feel like, hey, maybe the Predators could have won that. They were up 2-1 at the end of the first period. And then, of course, that was the last we saw of the Predators scoring goals. So definitely some things need to be a little bit different for the Nashville Predators tonight if they want to win.
Not to be mean, but was that the ice or is that just Liam Foudy?
I think it was. Now, here's what I really do think it was I think it was the ice, because I remember the puck kind of just taking weird bounces for both teams. Like it just was kind of janky, but bless Liam Foudy.
You're right.
Bless Liam Foudy. I mean, that's just tough. But you know what? He's going to get another penalty shot someday and he'll make it and all will be forgiven and redeemed.
Yeah, 100%. And we were talking about this earlier, that October feeling like forever ago.
Yeah.
At this point, especially in hockey terms, because of course, Nashville Predators 13-3 in their last 16 games, a far cry from where they were at the start of the season when they played the Canucks. So it's fun to go back and kind of look at where this team is now versus where they were back then. Like an obvious one to me is that UC Saros was not UC Saros at the beginning of the season. We kind of mentioned that the Preds were almost winning in spite of him. Almost, where it was, a lot of like 4-3 games or, quick things where just, one bad goal or, sort of a bad read on the puck. And, Saros wasn't quite Saros. Now UC Saros is cooking. And now the Predators are getting some game stealing performances out of him. And I think that's important for a game like this one. Is because, the Predators can maybe survive some of that Vancouver onslaught a little bit better.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think probably that's the most obvious difference. And when you go back and look at these games, go back and watch them, watch the highlights of these games, there are a couple of goals with Vancouver where you're like, hmm,
Yeah,
that's an
for sure.
unusual UC Saros goal, So I do think with Saros playing better. The other thing is, if you go back and watch, one of the things that Andrew Brunette has said recently is that the defense has gotten better about playing in front of Saros, in the sense of like keeping lanes open for him to see and also not crowding him. And if you go back and look at these highlights in some of these games in October, and you'll see it in these Vancouver games, the defense really is literally up in his business in the blue
Yeah.
paint, where, there's a couple times where you think, you know what, I think if you just let Saros do Saros, he would have been better. So I think there's adjustments defensively that have helped. And I just think Saros is cooking. So I agree with you. I think that's going to be the biggest difference. And I think Saros is going to be the biggest challenge. If he's the one who gets the start tonight, which I expect that he will, I
I'd be
think that's the
surprised if he
biggest
wasn't.
difference in the game is UC Saros. I think he's going to really frustrate the Canucks.
Yeah, Saros versus Demko. I would assume Thatcher
I
Demko
would
is
assume.
playing for Vancouver. That's another player who,
Wow.
had a rough year last year, who's now coming back and being, absolute elite
Yeah.
in that this season. And what else stands out to you in terms of differences from then to now?
One of the things that I think is very different about the Predators team is that they're much more comfortable playing that speed game right now that
Mhm.
Andrew Brunette was working on in October. And that's they're anticipating that kind of a game tonight against Vancouver because, they do play with a lot of speed. Alexander Carrier talked about the fact that this game's going to be Carolina Hurricanes pace. It's going to be up and down the ice. But I think Nashville is much more comfortable and much more confident playing at that kind of a speed now than they were in October, where they were still kind of getting used to that system. So I do think speed is going to be different. I think the Predators are going to be more comfortable transitioning quickly. I think they're going to be looking for more goals off the rush than what we saw from them, back in October. So I think speed is going to look very different in this game than it did in October for them.
Yeah, 100%. And I think comfort is the absolute right word to
Yes.
use there, because you heard Andrew Brunette, sort of in some of those hiccups earlier in the season go, hey, like, you can tell it's just like the players are still a little bit unsure of themselves.
Mhm.
I would translate that to stronger confidence this
Yes.
time around as well. The players, you and I have talked about this before, where sometimes, like, if a coach tells you to do something, if he's like, no, 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 this is going to work, and it doesn't work, then you start to doubt. Then you start to go back to, okay, let's just kind of do what, our basic instincts are to do.
Right.
Then you start winning some games like the Predators have been doing. We talked about that Colorado game, kind of, it felt like the impetus to this turnaround.
Mhm.
It felt like, now, okay, hey, look, we did what Andrew Brunette did. We played this style. We can do it now, and they're paying off in the wins. So now we know we can play this way. Now we know that what we're going to do is going to pay off with some actual tangible wins. So let's just keep doing it. Like, now that
Right.
we've done it, let's just keep on keeping on. And I think that's different this time around. Is I think the Predators have more confidence to go out and play a game like this in the style that they want than they
Mhm.
maybe did in October, just because, they were so, up and down that, they were uncomfortable. They were kind of going back into their comfort blanket of the John Hines era a little bit. Now I think this is a team that is playing with confidence in knowing that they know that they can pull out a win in a game like this.
Yeah, I agree with you. Confidence is a huge thing, but it's so strange. And this is just strictly, there is no scientific formula for this observation that I'm going to make, but just strictly kind of trying to read vibes, which, I pride myself on being okay at. So,
Yeah.
but, this is a very confident team. That's a word that you hear in talking to the players. Like, we're very confident. But they're also, I'm amazed by, and I'm not even sure how to describe it. It is a very confident locker room. I think they're a very comfortable locker room with what they, like what you're saying. Like, we're comfortable with what we know we need to do now. But there's no, for as good as the Nashville Predators are, this isn't a locker room that feels like it's overbuying into their hype.
No.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that we've had times with the Nashville Predators before where they've been on good runs, and it almost feels like they overbuy into the hype to where it's like, yeah, we're good, and we can ride on that. Like, we can just kind of,
2022.
like we can just sort of let it roll because we're good. And there's none of that vibe in the locker room. Like, everybody is gaining confidence from this 13-3 run. Everybody is learning a lot from it, but there's nobody in that locker room that feels like they don't have to work really, really hard for what they're getting. And I wish I could put it into words better than what I am right now, but they're just not overbuying into the hype. Like, they're still so hyper focused on the very next thing that nobody's caught up in the big picture. And I think there have been times in the past where the team has gotten a little bit caught up in the hype and in the big picture, and you just don't see that in the locker room. So I really think that's a sign of maturity. I think that's something that Andrew Brunette probably has been very intentional about. So it's good to see it. It makes you feel like, okay, they're not going to get totally blindsided because they're just still really focused on the work.
Yeah, and I think the pressure is off this season,
Yeah.
and it helps too. It's like, how many times we mentioned the Preds missed the playoffs. Who cares? Like, they're rebuilding, they're revamping, they're trying to figure some things out. If the Preds play as well as they have, awesome. Yeah, hey, we're winning games. We didn't expect to win games. I think as long as that stays, that attitude stays, the Predators are in for, I think a very fruitful season. And a game like this, I think, will say a lot about, what the team's mindset is moving forward into the second half of the year. Predators versus Canucks tonight, 7:00 Central puck drop. Full recap of that game coming up on tomorrow's Locked On Predators. For the rest of the show, word association. Quick little game Ann and I are going to play. It's revolving around some hockey, revolving around some Nashville Predators. We'll see what we can come up with coming up in just 1 second.
First, I want to let you know this episode is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. Look, the holidays are coming up, and some of the best gifts that you can give or get are experiences. So if you're looking to give a great experience gift, you need to go and download the Game Time app. You're going to find the best prices for comedy shows, sporting events, theater, and concerts in your area. With Game Time, you can buy a great gift without all that ticket purchasing hassle. It's easy to find tickets for every kind of event. The Harlem Globetrotters, Beetlejuice the Musical, Dancing with the Stars on tour, or comedian Tom Segura, all of them are going to be around Nashville and are on Game Time. And you can get great deals on all of these, and you can buy your tickets with confidence. Game Time gives you a view of your seat. They have no hidden fees. There's no last-minute cost surprises at checkout, and they have great last minute deals and flash deals. So if you need a great last minute gift, download the Game Time app and plan an experience with your friends or your family without any stress. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONNHL. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL, and you're going to get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
All right, let's end the show with a game of word association. This is going to be a doozy. Basically, Ann and I are each going to say a word involving the Predators. It can be a player, it can be a thing, it can be something in the NHL, and the other is going to have to come up with a word that they associate with it. And this was your baby, so do you want to drop the first word on me?
I do want to drop the first word, and let's just see how this goes. We're trying something new here today, folks.
Okay.
We'll see how it goes. All right, my first word that I am dropping, Jeremy Lauzon.
Jeremy Lauzon.
What's your word association with Jeremy Lauzon? I feel like you're thinking way too much for word association.
I am gonna go block.
Oh, that's a great one.
And I feel like, just because he feels like a giant block. He's a brick wall.
He is.
A block that'll punch you in the face. But it also feels like he's kind of like an underrated building block. Maybe. Remember when when they traded a second round pick and we are like, that's a weird trade. Then when they signed into a 4-year deal, we're like, that's a weird contract.
Yeah.
It feels like this season in particular, that sort of belief is starting to pay off. And you're starting to see the higher end of what we see out of Jeremy Lauzon.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say Jeremy Lauzon is probably one of the most improved players this season for the Predators.
Yeah.
Like I've been really
100%.
impressed with him. Yeah.
All right. And here's another one for you.
Okay. Hope. Okay.
Tomasino.
Hope. That's my word for Phil Tomasino. Hope. That's just the first word that comes to mind because I think it's been so up and down for Tomo. And I think and this is part of my thing with young players, his rookie year, 76 games, he was so successful. That sets an expectation. And I just think this is a tough gig, y'all, especially for a young player. So I still have a ton of hope that Phil Tomasino is not done here yet. The other word I would say is bromance with he and Michael McCarron. I think they have the best hockey bromance in hockey, hands down. I adore those two.
The best buddy comedy on the Nashville Predators.
Oh my gosh. Would they not make the best reality show, the two of them together? Like, can we just do a reality show?
Absolutely.
Of McCarron and Tomo. But yeah, Tomasino is hope. I just, a lot of hope. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next one.
All right. Here we go. Vancouver Canucks.
Vancouver Canucks, I'll go spicy.
Oh.
I feel like they're just a spicy team, where it's this sort of, it's like the next big thing almost, look at like all just like the talent they have, like look at all, they have franchise players, I think legitimate franchise players in all three major positions, forward. With Elias Pettersson, defense with Quinn Hughes, goaltender with Thatcher Demko. I think they're built to be like the next Tampa Bay Lightning, the next Colorado Avalanche. And maybe just a few more tweaks here and there will get that done. But it's spicy because it's like, ooh, that like hot fightery team that you want to cheer for, that you want to play with on EA Sports NHL 24. That seems like the Canucks are that sort of next big thing.
Yeah. They're a really fun team to watch. They're not necessarily a team that makes you feel good going into a game against them. But this season, those are games you really want to watch with the Canucks. They're really fun. I would agree with you.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Here's where we ready to get spicy a little bit, Ann.
I don't know. I don't want to reveal too much.
Okay.
But yeah, let's do it.
Eeli Tolvanen.
Oh, narrative. That's my word. Narrative.
No.
And I see you're just putting me. And look, I want to say this knowing that I could be wrong. Like, okay. I'm not saying I'm 100% right, but can I just put out there for people to pick up and chew on? Perhaps the narrative is not necessarily accurate. Perhaps it is. Yeah. But perhaps it's not, because the narrative from Tolvanen when he's had the opportunity to talk about the situation in Nashville was very much like they kept asking me for different things and they never told me what they really wanted from me. In one game it was this, and one game it was that. And I can see where that could perhaps be true. But I also think you have to be very careful to understand you are only ever going to get one narrative in this situation. John Hynes will never come out and say anything about that situation. John Hynes is never going to come out and go, yes, but you know what? He didn't put in the work. David Poile is never going to come out and go, yeah, we had this great draft pick. We were thinking we were going to build this franchise around. And you know what? He just was PO'd that he couldn't just be a straight shooter. So I'm just putting, and look.
Barry Trotz would say that. Barry Trotz would not be afraid to say that.
From Barry Trotz, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
But that's my word, is narrative, because Eeli Tolvanen, and I hate that he left and all of that stuff, but narrative. He gets to set the narrative for this story, and he could be right.
Yeah.
But he could also just be the only one talking.
Yeah, I agree. I would have gone like boiling point too, because it seemed like that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of fan unrest. For what it's worth, Eeli Tolvanen, 9 goals, 12 assists this year. Just throwing it out. He would be the 4th leading scorer on the Preds this year.
Yeah. And you know what? I honestly, I wish him nothing but good. And I think sometimes, you've got to have the right person at the right place at the right time. So,
Sure.
Good for him. Truly good for him.
Yeah. All right. Drop another one on me.
All right. Are you ready for this one?
No, but give it to me.
I know this game is terrifying.
Yeah.
Barry Trotz.
Old school.
Interesting.
I think he is bringing this old school mentality of, sort of managing a team and managing players into a new style of game. All that talk, we hear, it's like, oh, I want players who are going to retire or who aren't going to want to retire here, who are going to want to help us win, dropping that exact line after dealing with certain players coming up in the news. That's, very pointed, being very transparent about the Tyson Barrie situation.
Yeah.
This is like, the curmudgeon-y old coach who goes into like media availability and will just completely throw someone under the bus. He's, this completely old school transparent style, but he's doing it, I think in a very open way with some of these players. And he's, it's not like, oh, this is the way we're doing it. I think he's willing to, kind of adjust to what the NHL is. And I think he is, sort of bringing that attitude into sort of this new school way of thinking and building a team in the NHL. So it's almost like, a little fusion of old school and new school in the Predators front office right now with Barry Trotz.
Yeah, I really like what Barry Trotz has done. And this has not been easy. Barry Trotz came in guns a-blazing. He did his thing. Barry Trotz is Barry Trotzin. And, good for him. And so far, so good. So yeah, Barry Trotz he's fun.
Yeah, he's certainly gives us no shortage of stuff to talk about.
Yes, he's fun.
Yeah. Tomorrow, Predators versus Canucks recap. We'll have our one word to describe the game, talk about any of the big points, and look ahead to the rest of the week because we have some big games on the calendar ahead of us. And where can people find your work?
You can find my work online at InsideThePreds.com. You can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
You can find me at _NS Morgan on Twitter, X, whatever. Also, be sure to follow the podcast at LO_Predators. You can read my work at penaltyboxradio.com. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Back with an all-new episode tomorrow. We'll see you then.